In the summer of 1896, 1,500 people died in just 10 days across New York City. Not from disease, not from violence, from heat. Indoor temperatures in the tenements reached 120 degrees, and people were so desperate for relief that they slept on fire escapes and rooftops, sometimes rolling off in their sleep and falling to their deaths on the pavement below. This is the world before air conditioning. Here's what life was really like when summer could kill you. Before we get going, subscribe if you want more stories like this. And I'm always curious, where are you listening from? Drop your city and what time it is in the comments. I check them, and it's wild seeing people from Tokyo to Toronto all tuning in at different hours. Sometimes someone from London says good morning while I'm recording this at midnight. Time zones never stop being weird to me. Alright, tonight we're heading back to 1896 America, but first, get comfortable. I mean it. Fix your pillows, pull up that blanket. Where we're going, you're gonna want to be cozy, because the people we're about to meet would have given anything for what you have right now. Your eyes open to darkness. Not the peaceful darkness of a cool bedroom, but the thick, heavy darkness of a New York tenement in July. The kind of darkness that seems to have weight to it, pressing down on your chest like a wool blanket you can't kick off. Your name is Clara Sullivan, and you're 23 years old, and you work 12 hours a day at a garment factory on the Lower East Side, and right now, at 4 in the morning, you're lying on a fire escape in your underclothes, trying to remember what it feels like to breathe. The metal grating beneath you is still warm. It absorbed the sun all day yesterday, and it's been slowly releasing that heat back into the already suffocating air. Your thin cotton slip is damp with sweat. It's been damp since you crawled out here around midnight, when the temperature inside your tiny one-room apartment reached somewhere north of 100 degrees. You share that apartment with 5 other people. Your mother, your father, your 2 younger brothers, and a boarder named Paddy who rents the corner by the window and works nights at the slaughterhouse. 6 people, 1 room, no running water, and no airflow to speak of. The building is 5 stories tall, brick on all sides, packed in tight between 2 other identical buildings. In winter, the brick holds the cold and you freeze. In summer, the brick holds the heat and you cook. This is how 2/3 of New York City lives right now, in old law tenements built before anyone thought to require things like windows that open or hallways that don't dead end. These buildings were designed to pack as many people as possible into as small a space as possible, and nobody really thought about what happens when you put 100 families into a brick box and the temperature hits 95 degrees for 10 days straight. Which it has. For the past week, the mercury has refused to drop below 90, even at night. The humidity hovers around 90%, which means the sweat on your skin has nowhere to go. It just sits there, making everything worse. Your hair sticks to the back of your neck. Your dress clings to your back. Even the sheets on your bed, such as they are, feel like they've been pulled from a wash basin, so you're on the fire escape. You and about half the neighbourhood. If you looked down right now, you'd see them. On every floor of every building on this block, people are draped over the iron railings and sprawled on the narrow platforms. Men in their undershirts, women in their chemises, children curled up on folded blankets like puppies in a basket. Nobody cares about modesty when it's this hot. Nobody cares about anything except finding a breath of air that doesn't feel like it's coming from an oven. The fire escapes weren't meant for this, of course. They were meant for fires. The city passed a law after a terrible blaze in 1860 that killed 10 women and children, mandating that all tenement buildings have some kind of exterior escape route. But the law was enforced about as well as you'd expect, and most of the fire escapes that exist are held together with hope and rust. The building inspector comes by once in a while and threatens fines if people block the escapes with mattresses and chairs, but he never actually issues any. Everyone knows the fines would be pointless. Where else are people supposed to go? Your mother hates when you sleep out here. She read in the paper about a family on Eldridge Street last summer, a woman and her 3 children who all climbed out on the fire escape during a heat wave and fell asleep, and sometime before dawn, the youngest, a boy of 4, rolled off the edge and dropped 3 stories to the courtyard below, killed instantly. Your mother read you that story 3 times, like she thought repetition would make you too scared to risk it. But here's the thing about being so hot you can't think. You stop caring about risks. You do almost anything for relief. Some folks go to the roof instead. You can see them up there sometimes, silhouettes against the purple sky, spreading out blankets on the tar and gravel and hoping for a breeze. The rooftops are dangerous too, maybe more dangerous than the fire escapes, because the edges aren't marked and the tar gets soft in the heat and people sometimes step wrong in the dark. But at least up there you might catch a gust of wind coming off the East River. Down here on the 4th floor, wedged between buildings, you're lucky if you feel anything moving at all. The worst part isn't the heat itself, the worst part is that it never stops. During the day, the sun bakes the streets until the air above the cobblestones shimmers like water. Horse manure and garbage and industrial smoke combine into a smell that could knock a person unconscious. You walk to work in the morning, and by the time you get there, your clothes are soaked through. You work all day in a factory with windows that don't open and 100 other sweating bodies crammed into a space meant for 50, and by the time you walk home, you can feel your heart pounding in your throat. Then night comes and you think, finally, relief. But relief never arrives. The bricks that absorbed all that heat during the day start to radiate it back, and the air inside the tenements actually gets hotter after sunset. Your little apartment becomes an oven with the door closed. You wet a rag and drape it over your forehead, and it's warm within minutes. You drink water from the shared tap in the hallway, and it's tepid, tasting of rust and something metallic you try not to think about. This is when people start to die. Not all at once, not dramatically like in a fire or a flood, just quietly in the night, in their sleep. An old woman on the 3rd floor who didn't wake up, a baby on the 1st floor whose crying stopped sometime around midnight, a man who worked at the docks and came home exhausted and lay down and never got back up. The heat takes the weak ones first, the very young and the very old, but after a week of this, it starts taking everyone. Strong men in the prime of their lives collapsing on the street, women dropping in the middle of doing laundry, children who were playing in the morning and lying still by afternoon. The newspapers are calling it a heat wave, like it's some kind of natural phenomenon, like there's nothing anyone could have done. But you know better. You've seen the rich folks on 5th Avenue, the ones with houses big enough to have cross breezes and servants to fan them and ice delivered twice a day. You've seen them drive past in their carriages on the way to the train station, fleeing the city for their summer cottages in Newport or their mountain lodges in the Adirondacks. They don't stay here and sweat, they get out. And meanwhile, down here on the Lower East Side, the bodies are piling up faster than the coroner can count them. You shift on the fire escape, trying to find a position that doesn't press the metal grating into your hip. Somewhere below, a baby is crying, the thin, exhausted wail of an infant who's too hot to sleep but too tired to scream. Somewhere above, a couple is arguing in Italian, their words sharp and rapid, even at this hour. Somewhere down the block, a dog is barking, and you wonder if dogs can die of heat too, and you decide they probably can. Everything can. Everything is dying. The whole city is slowly cooking itself to death. But you're not going to die. Not tonight. Not from heat, anyway. You've survived 23 summers in this city, and you know the tricks. You know to soak your hair before you go to sleep. You know to hang wet sheets in the window if there's any breeze at all, so the air cools as it passes through. You know to keep a bucket of water by the bed and dip your feet in it when the heat gets unbearable. You know to wear white, to eat light, to move slow. You know not to drink too much beer no matter how good it sounds, because alcohol just makes you hotter. Most importantly, you know to wait. Every heat wave ends eventually. The weather breaks, the temperature drops, and for a few blessed days or weeks, the city feels almost livable again. You just have to survive until then. You just have to make it through another day, another night, another endless hour of lying here on this iron grating, staring up at the sliver of sky visible between the buildings, waiting for the sun to rise so you can do it all over again. The fire escape creaks as someone shifts above you. Probably Mrs. Kowalski from the 5th floor, a widow with swollen ankles who spends most of her days sitting by her window, watching the street. She's out here too, you know. Everyone is. The whole building has emptied itself onto the fire escapes and the rooftops and the front stoops. All of you refugees from your own homes camping out in the open air like it's the only safe place left. And maybe it is. At least out here, you can breathe. At least out here, there's a chance, however small, that a breeze might wander down from the Hudson and offer a moment's relief. Inside, there's nothing but stillness and heat and the smell of 6 bodies packed too close together. A church bell rings somewhere in the distance. 5 o'clock, another hour until dawn, another hour until you have to go back inside and put on your dress and eat your breakfast of bread and weak tea and walk 40 minutes to the factory where you'll spend the next 12 hours stitching shirtwaists in a room so hot the thread sticks to your fingers. You close your eyes, not to sleep exactly. You're too hot to really sleep, but to rest, to try to quiet your mind the way you've learned to quiet it over years of practice, to think about anything except the temperature, to imagine yourself somewhere else, anywhere else. A forest, maybe. A stream. A mountaintop with snow still clinging to the rocks. The metal grating presses into your back. The air sits heavy on your chest. Somewhere in the building, someone coughs, a deep, rattling sound that seems to go on forever. This is life in the age before air conditioning. This is how millions of people lived, summer after summer, year after year. This is what your great-great-grandparents knew as normal. But here's the thing, they didn't just suffer, they didn't just lie on fire escapes and pray for cooler weather. They fought back, they invented ways to beat the heat, some clever and some desperate and some downright ingenious. They redesigned their houses and their clothes and their daily routines. They built an entire industry around frozen water shipped from New England ponds. They created a culture of porches and fans and afternoon naps and evening strolls and ice cream parlours and rooftop gardens. They survived. And not just survived, they thrived. They found ways to live full, rich, complicated lives in a world where summer could kill you, and the only defence was human ingenuity. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with morning. The sun will be up soon, and when it rises over the East River and hits the brick tenements of the Lower East Side, the day's battle against the heat will begin again. But first, in the grey light before dawn, there's a moment of almost quiet, a moment when the temperature is as close to bearable as it's going to get for the next 16 hours, a moment when Clara Sullivan opens her eyes on the fire escape and takes a breath that doesn't feel like inhaling soup. And then she hears it, the sound that means another day is starting. The clop of hooves on cobblestone, the creak of wooden wheels, and a voice calling out in the early morning stillness. Ice, ice for sale, ice. The iceman is coming, and with him comes the first weapon in the daily war against summer. But that's the next part of the story. For now, Clara lies still on the fire escape, watching the sky turn from black to grey to the palest pink, and she lets herself imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like to be cool. The iceman's wagon rounds the corner of Orchard Street, just as the first real light of morning hits the tenements. Clara watches from the fire escape as the horse, a tired-looking grey mare with sweat already darkening her flanks, pulls a wooden cart stacked high with something covered in canvas and sawdust. Ice. Actual frozen water, cut from ponds in Massachusetts and shipped down to the city in insulated rail cars, packed in sawdust to keep it from melting. It sounds crazy when you think about it. Someone, somewhere, figured out how to take ice from a frozen lake in January and keep it cold enough to sell in July, and now there's a whole industry built around the idea. Wagons like this one roll through every neighbourhood in the city every single day, delivering blocks of ice to anyone who can afford it. And almost everyone can afford it. That's the wild part. Ice used to be something only rich people had. Your grandmother told you stories about growing up in Ireland, where ice was something you saw in winter and never thought about the rest of the year. But here in America, in 1896, even a seamstress living in a tenement can have ice delivered to her door. Well, to her building's door anyway. Clara climbs back through the window into the stifling apartment. Her family is stirring now, her brothers rubbing sleep from their eyes, her father already pulling on his boots for work. Her mother stands at the tiny cook stove, boiling water for tea, even though the last thing anyone wants is something hot. But the water from the tap isn't safe to drink without boiling it first, so hot tea it is. Ice is here, Clara says. I'll go down. Her mother hands her a few coins from the jar on the shelf. Not much. Enough for maybe a £25 block, which will last about 2 days if they're careful. Longer if the weather breaks. Shorter if it doesn't. Clara takes the coins and heads down the narrow stairs, joining the stream of other tenants doing the same thing. Mrs. Kowalski from upstairs, still in her nightdress. Mr. Bernstein from the second floor, his beard uncombed. The Italian family from the back apartment, the mother carrying her youngest on her hip. Everyone converging on the street where the iceman has stopped his wagon and is already chipping away at the big blocks with a heavy pick. The iceman's name is Patrick, or maybe Peter, Clara can never remember. He's built like a draft horse himself, thick arms and broad shoulders from years of hauling ice. He wears a leather pad on his shoulder where he carries the blocks, and his hands are red and rough from handling frozen water all day. In winter, he probably has some other job. In summer, he's the most popular man on the Lower East Side. "Morning, ladies," he says, not looking up from his work. "Hot one today?" "Hot one yesterday too," Mrs. Kowalski mutters. "Hot one every day." Patrick just laughs. He uses a pair of heavy metal tongs to grip a block and lifts it onto a scale hanging from the side of the wagon. "25 for you." Clara nods and hands over the coins. Patrick chips off a block about the size of a small suitcase, wraps it in burlap and hands it over. The cold radiating off it feels like a miracle. Clara presses it against her chest for just a second, not caring that the burlap is already damp and the cold is soaking through her dress. For one beautiful moment, she's not hot. Then she remembers she has to carry this thing up 4 flights of stairs. The icebox in the Sullivan apartment is a wooden cabinet about 3 feet tall, lined with zinc to keep the moisture in. There's a compartment on top where the ice goes, and shelves below where they keep whatever food needs to stay cold. Milk, mostly. Butter, when they can afford it. Sometimes a bit of meat if there's been extra money. The ice melts slowly throughout the day, dripping into a pan underneath that someone has to remember to empty before it overflows. It's not refrigeration. Not really. The food doesn't stay cold the way it does in one of those fancy electric ice boxes the newspapers are always advertising. But it's cold enough to keep the milk from going sour in an afternoon, cold enough to chill a glass of water, cold enough to press a piece of ice wrapped in cloth against your forehead when the heat gets unbearable. And here's what gets Clara sometimes when she's tired enough to think strange thoughts. 50 years ago, none of this existed. Her grandmother never had an icebox. Her great-grandmother probably never even tasted ice in summer. All of this, the ice wagons and the delivery routes and the zinc-lined boxes in every kitchen, all of it came from one guy with a crazy idea. The ice trade started because some rich kid in Boston looked at a frozen pond and thought, I bet I could sell this. His name was Frederick Tudor. Boston family, plenty of money, the kind of guy who probably never had to work a day in his life if he didn't want to. But he got this idea stuck in his head sometime around 1805. The Caribbean islands are hot. New England has lots of frozen ponds in winter. What if you could ship ice from here to there? Everyone told him he was nuts. Ship ice to the tropics? The stuff would melt before it got halfway there, and even if some of it survived, who would buy it? People in Martinique had never even seen ice. They wouldn't know what to do with it. Tudor didn't care. He bought a ship, loaded it with ice cut from a pond on his family's property, and sailed it down to Martinique in 1806. It was a disaster. He lost money. A lot of money. The ice melted faster than he expected, and the people in Martinique just looked at it like he was trying to sell them frozen rocks. They had no ice houses to store it in, no idea how to keep it cold, no use for it at all. So Tudor went back to Boston, licked his wounds, and tried again, and again, and again. He lost so much money that he ended up in debtor's prison twice. His own family thought he was insane. Boston society made jokes about him. But here's the thing about Frederick Tudor. The man was stubborn in a way that's hard to even imagine. He just kept at it. He figured out that sawdust was better than straw for insulation. He built ice houses in the ports where he was shipping. He gave away ice for free to bartenders, figuring that once people tasted a cold drink, they'd be hooked for life. And eventually, it worked. By the 1830s, Tudor was shipping ice to Calcutta. Calcutta, a 4-month journey halfway around the world, and somehow he was getting ice there still frozen. The British in India went absolutely crazy for it. Cold drinks in the tropics. It was like magic. They called him the Ice King. He made a fortune, and more than that, he created an entire industry out of nothing. By the time he died in 1864, ice harvesting was one of the biggest businesses in New England. Thousands of men spent their winters cutting blocks from frozen lakes and rivers, packing them in sawdust, storing them in massive ice houses that dotted the landscape from Maine to Massachusetts. And every summer, those blocks got loaded onto trains and shipped to cities all over America, where guys like Patrick rolled through neighborhoods like this one, selling chunks of frozen pond water to seamstresses and widows and factory workers. Clara chips a piece off her new block and drops it in her glass of boiled water. The ice cracks and pops as it hits the warm liquid, releasing little bubbles of air that have been trapped inside since January. She drinks and the cold slides down her throat like a blessing. This is how you survive summer, one glass of cold water at a time. By 8 o'clock, the temperature is already climbing past 80. Clara has changed into her work dress, a lightweight cotton thing in a pale blue that her mother made from fabric scraps last spring. It's not fashionable and it's not pretty, but it breathes. That's all that matters. Her brothers have left for their jobs, one at a print shop and one hauling crates at the waterfront. Her father is long gone, off to the construction site where he spends his days laying bricks in the sun. Clara doesn't know how he does it. She works indoors and she can barely stand the heat. Working outside in direct sunlight, lifting heavy things, that's a different kind of torture entirely. But people do it. They have to. There's no calling in sick because it's hot. There's no taking the day off because the temperature is dangerous. You work or you don't eat. Simple as that. The walk to the factory takes Clara through some of the most crowded streets in the city. Pushcart vendors are already setting up, selling everything from pickles to suspenders to live chickens. Newsboys are shouting headlines, something about the presidential election, something about Cuba, something about a baseball game. Women hang laundry from fire escapes, the wet fabric steaming in the morning heat. Men stand on corners, smoking and talking, waiting for work that may or may not come. And everywhere, the smell. Clara has lived in New York her whole life, so she barely notices it anymore. But if you're not used to it, the smell of a New York summer can knock you flat. Horse manure on every street, piling up faster than the sanitation workers can collect it. Garbage rotting in the gutters. The rendering plants and slaughterhouses and tanneries pumping their stench into the air. And underneath it all, the smell of a million sweating bodies packed too close together. Some days, when the wind is right, you can smell the ocean. Those are good days. Today is not one of those days. Today, the air is still and thick, and Clara breathes through her mouth and walks fast and tries not to think about it. She passes an ice cream parlour on Delancey Street, already open even though it's barely past 8. A few kids are standing outside, faces pressed to the window, watching the man behind the counter scoop pale vanilla into paper cups. Ice cream used to be a rich person's thing too, like everything else that required keeping something cold. But now there are parlours like this one all over the city, serving up penny dishes to anyone with a coin. Clara doesn't stop. She can't afford it, for one thing, and she doesn't have time. The foreman docks you 15 minutes pay if you're even 1 minute late, and she's already cutting it close. But she thinks about it. She thinks about how nice it would be to sit in that parlour in the shade, eating something cold and sweet. She thinks about the ice packed around the metal churns, keeping everything frozen. She thinks about Frederick Tudor, the crazy rich kid who went broke twice trying to convince people that frozen water was worth money. He was right in the end. That's the thing. Everyone laughed at him, and he was right. The factory comes into view, a 6-story brick building with windows that don't open and a single door that's already propped wide in a futile attempt at ventilation. Clara joins the stream of other workers filing inside, women mostly, all of them dressed in light cotton, all of them already sweating. Inside, the heat is worse, always worse. 100 bodies crammed into a room meant for half that, plus a dozen sewing machines that generate their own warmth, plus gas lamps because the natural light isn't bright enough to see the fine stitching. The combination turns the factory into something like a furnace. Clara finds her station and sits down. Her machine is an old Singer, foot-powered, which means she'll be pumping the treadle all day like she's riding some kind of stationary bicycle. The fabric waiting in her basket is white cotton, shirtwaists for some department store uptown. She'll make 100 of them today if she's fast, maybe more. The foreman walks past, checking that everyone is in their place. He's a red-faced man named Murphy, who wears his jacket even in this heat because he thinks it makes him look important. Clara doesn't know how he stands it. She suspects he's one of those people who doesn't sweat much, which seems profoundly unfair. "Let's go, ladies," Murphy says. "We got orders to fill." Clara feeds fabric into her machine and starts to pump. The needle rises and falls, the thread pulls tight, the treadle creaks with each push of her foot. Around her, 100 other machines are doing the same thing, filling the room with a rhythmic clatter that will continue for the next 12 hours. This is work in 1896. This is how you spend your days if you're young and female and poor in New York City. You sit in a hot room and you sew, and you try not to think about the heat, and you count the hours until you can go home and climb back out on the fire escape and wait for night to bring whatever small relief it might. But Clara isn't thinking about that right now. She's thinking about ice, about cold water, about the block sitting in her icebox at home, slowly melting, dripping into the pan underneath. She's thinking about how tonight, when she gets home, she'll chip off another piece and press it against her wrists and her neck and her forehead, and for a few seconds she'll feel almost human again. She's thinking about Frederick Tudor, the Ice King, who died 30 years ago and never knew that his crazy idea would become the only thing keeping people like Clara alive through summers like this one. The needle rises and falls, the treadle creaks. Outside, the sun climbs higher and the city gets hotter, and somewhere across town another ice wagon is making its rounds. By noon, Clara's dress is soaked through. The pale blue cotton has turned darker in patches under her arms and across her back, and she can feel the fabric clinging to her skin every time she moves. Her hair, pinned up this morning in a neat twist, has started escaping in damp curls around her face. She pushes them back with the heel of her hand and keeps sewing. Here's what people always get wrong about clothes in the 1890s. They look at old photographs and they see women in floor-length dresses with high collars and long sleeves, men in three-piece suits with starched shirts buttoned all the way up, and they think, how did anyone survive summer dressed like that? The answer is the clothes were different, not just in style, in substance. Clara's work dress is cotton, real cotton, not the cotton polyester blend you might be thinking of, the stuff they make t-shirts out of now. Pure cotton, grown in the south and woven into fabric so lightweight you can almost see through it. It breathes in a way that modern fabrics don't. Air moves through it. Sweat evaporates from it. When a breeze comes through, and occasionally one does even in this factory, Clara can feel it against her damp skin through the fabric. The same goes for linen. Rich ladies wear linen in summer, crisp white dresses that wrinkle if you look at them wrong, but keep you cooler than almost anything else. And even wool, if you can believe it. Tropical weight wool, so thin and fine it's like wearing a whisper. Men's suits made from this stuff actually breathe better than the polyester suits businessmen wear now. That's the secret nobody talks about. The Victorians weren't stupid. They couldn't control the weather, but they could control what they put on their bodies, and they paid attention to it in ways we've forgotten. They knew which fabrics worked in summer and which didn't. They knew that natural fibres, the stuff that comes from plants and animals, handles heat better than anything man-made. Of course, they didn't know it was because natural fibres wick moisture away from the skin and allow for air circulation, while synthetic fabrics trap heat and humidity against the body. They just knew that grandmother's cotton chemise was cooler than anything else they owned, and they dressed accordingly. Clara's wearing 4 layers right now, which sounds insane until you understand what those layers are doing. First, next to her skin, a thin cotton chemise that absorbs sweat and keeps it from soaking into her outer clothes. Then her corset, which, yes, is uncomfortable, but is also made of cotton canvas and actually provides some structure that keeps the outer dress from sticking to her body. Then a single cotton petticoat, much lighter than the multiple heavy petticoats women wore earlier in the century, and finally the dress itself. Each layer serves a purpose. The chemise gets wet. The corset creates a tiny pocket of air between the wet chemise and the outer clothes. The petticoat keeps the skirt from tangling around her legs. The dress presents a modest, respectable appearance to the world. And here's the weird part. Sometimes being wet actually helps. When Clara's chemise is soaked with sweat and she steps into a spot where there's even a hint of moving air, that wet fabric turns into a cooling system. The water evaporates, and evaporation takes heat with it. It's the same principle behind sweating in the first place, just with an extra layer of fabric to hold the moisture and extend the cooling effect. This is why people in hot climates have worn layers for thousands of years. Desert peoples wrap themselves in robes. Tropical cultures developed loose, flowing garments that catch the breeze. The human body, left to its own devices, figured out a long time ago that fabric can be a tool, not just a covering. The Victorians understood this too, even if they couldn't explain it scientifically. They knew that a white dress reflected the sun better than a dark one. They knew that loose sleeves were cooler than tight ones. They knew that a hat with a broad brim could drop the temperature of your face by 10 degrees just by blocking direct sunlight, and they had fans. Clara keeps a fan tucked into her waistband while she works, a simple paper thing printed with an advertisement for a patent medicine. Dr. Somebody's digestive tonic, guaranteed to cure whatever ails you. She doesn't remember where she got it. Probably some man on a street corner handing them out for free. Companies give away thousands of these things every summer. It's cheap advertising. The paper costs almost nothing, and every time someone fans themselves, they see the product name. Genius, really. During her lunch break, such as it is, Clara pulls out the fan and waves it slowly in front of her face. The air it moves is hot, almost as hot as the air sitting still, but the motion itself provides some relief. Movement is better than stillness, always. Around her, half the other women are doing the same thing. The factory floor at midday looks like a flock of paper birds all trying to take off at once. Fans waving, women talking, lunch pails open on laps. Most of the fans are advertisements. Dr. Porter's healing oil, Macready's fine furnishings, First National Bank of New York. A few are fancier, painted silk or carved ivory, handed down from mothers or bought as gifts, but those are rare here. In this crowd, you fan yourself with whatever you can get. It wasn't always like this. Clara's mother has a fan that belonged to her grandmother, an actual folding fan with bamboo sticks and painted paper, brought over from the old country decades ago. Back then, fans were expensive, status symbols. Rich ladies collected them like jewellery, showing off their hand-painted scenes and their mother-of-pearl handles. A fine fan could cost as much as a week's wages. But then came mass production, machines that could punch out 100 fan shapes in the time it used to take to make one by hand, printing technology that could stamp an image onto paper for pennies. Suddenly anyone could have a fan, and if you were a business looking to get your name in front of eyeballs, what better way than to hand out something people would actually use? The result is what you see in churches every Sunday in summer. Clara went last week, dragged along by her mother who worries about her immortal soul, and the service was almost worth attending just for the spectacle. 200 people packed into wooden pews, the windows open, but catching no breeze. The priest droning on about sin and redemption while every single person in the congregation fanned themselves with increasing desperation. From the back of the church, it looked like a wave. Paper fans moving in and out of sync, white and printed and occasionally silk, a constant flutter of motion that created a soft rushing sound underneath the sermon. The priest had to speak louder just to be heard over it. Some of the older women fanned so hard their arms were blurring. And every one of those fans had something printed on it. The church itself gave some out, with Bible verses and images of saints, but most came from local businesses. The funeral parlour down the street, the grocery on the corner, the ice company, which was a smart bit of advertising if you think about it. Clara saw at least 3 women fanning themselves with fans that said, "Sullivan's Ice Delivery, keeping you cool since 1872. No relation, as far as she knows." Men use fans too, though they'll rarely admit it. Clara's father carries a straw hat in summer and will occasionally use it to fan his face, claiming he's just adjusting it or brushing off dust. But she's seen him on the porch in the evening, waving that hat back and forth in a rhythm that's purely about moving air. Men also carry handkerchiefs, big cotton squares that they use to mop their foreheads and necks, and when no one's looking, they'll wave those around too. Everyone's desperate in summer. Dignity is a luxury. The women have it slightly easier in one way, slightly harder in another. Easier because fans are considered feminine and acceptable, so they can wave them openly without embarrassment. Harder because the fashion of the day still requires certain things even in the worst heat. Corsets, long skirts, sleeves to the wrist for any respectable occasion. A woman who showed up to church with bare arms would cause more of a scandal than the heatwave itself. But there are tricks. There are always tricks. The rich ladies have summer corsets made of lighter fabric with more ventilation built in. They have multiple sets of undergarments so they can change into fresh ones halfway through the day. They have servants to fan them. Actual human beings whose job is to stand there and wave palm fronds or feathered fans to create a breeze. The working women like Clara make do with what they have. Cotton instead of wool, white and pale blue instead of dark colours, hair pinned up off the neck to let air circulate, a paper fan in the waistband, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice, and the knowledge passed down through generations that you dress in layers not despite the heat, but because of it. The break ends. Murphy walks through with his eternal red face and his unseasonable jacket, telling everyone to get back to their machines. Clara tucks her fan away and returns to the treadle, pumping with her feet, feeding fabric through with her hands. The needle rises and falls. The sweat returns. But now she's thinking about fans, about how something so simple can make such a difference, about how the rich ladies with their silk fans and the factory workers with their paper ones are all doing the same thing, all moving air with the same motion, all united in the shared experience of being hot. It's strange when you think about it. The fan is maybe the oldest cooling technology in human history. Someone thousands of years ago probably waved a big leaf in front of their face and thought, that's better. And here we are in 1896, still doing basically the same thing, just with mass-produced paper and advertising slogans. Outside the factory windows, Clara can see the sun hanging in a white sky. Not a cloud anywhere, not a breath of wind. The kind of day that will kill a few more people in the tenements tonight. The ones who are too weak or too sick or too poor to find any relief at all. But Clara will survive. She has her cotton dress and her paper fan and her block of ice waiting at home. She has tricks and strategies and knowledge passed down from women who survived summers before her. She has the ability to adapt, to adjust, to make do with what she has. That's what people did before air conditioning. They adapted. They couldn't make the heat go away, so they learned to live with it. They figured out which fabrics breathed and which didn't. They invented fans and parasols and broad-brimmed hats. They planned their days around the movement of the sun, doing the hard work early and late, resting during the worst of the afternoon. They were smarter about heat than we are now in a lot of ways. We've outsourced our cooling to machines, and in exchange, we've forgotten how to dress for summer, how to move for summer, how to live for summer. Clara doesn't know any of this, of course. She just knows that her grandmother's advice about cotton was right, and her paper fan makes the afternoons slightly more bearable, and if she survives until evening, she can go home and press a piece of ice against her wrists and feel almost human again. The needle rises and falls. The fan stays tucked in her waistband, waiting. Somewhere across town, a rich woman in a white linen dress is being fanned by a servant while she sips lemonade from a crystal glass. Somewhere else, a man in a tropical weight suit is stepping into an ice cream parlour for a moment of cold. Somewhere, someone is dying in a room without windows, without ice, without even a paper fan to move the still air. Summer in 1896. Everyone finding their own way to survive. The men have their own tricks, though they'd never call them that. Clara watches Murphy make his rounds again, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief the size of a dinner napkin. He's wearing that jacket, yes, but underneath it his shirt is probably linen, loose and light. And she notices he keeps close to the windows when he walks, catching whatever faint movement of air might drift through. Out on the street, men who can afford it wear suits made from what they call tropical weight. The fabric looks like regular wool from a distance, but up close it's almost translucent, woven loose enough to let air through, light enough that it moves with the body instead of trapping heat against it. These suits cost more than Clara makes in a month, but the men who wear them swear by them. The ones who can't afford fancy suits do what Clara's father does. They roll up their sleeves the moment they're out of sight of their bosses. They loosen their collars. They carry their jackets over their arms instead of wearing them. And they all, every single one of them, wear hats. Straw hats in summer. That's the rule. The kind with a wide brim and a ribbon around the crown. The kind you see on everyone, from bankers to bricklayers, when the temperature climbs past 80. The straw lets air through while blocking the sun, and the brim creates a circle of shade around your face and neck. It's like carrying your own personal awning everywhere you go. Clara's father has had the same straw hat for 15 years. It's gone yellow and soft from years of sweat and sun, the brim a little floppy now, the ribbon faded to a colour that might once have been blue, but he wears it every day from May to September, and he credits it with keeping him alive through some of the worst heat waves on record. The ladies have parasols, which are basically the same idea but fancier. A small umbrella designed for sun instead of rain, covered in silk or cotton, often fringed or lacy or decorated with ribbons. Rich women never go outside in summer without one. They carry them closed until they step out of the shade, then snap them open and hold them at just the right angle to block the afternoon sun. Clara doesn't own a parasol. They're too expensive, and besides she leaves for work before the sun is really bad and comes home after it's started to set. But she's seen them, whole forests of them moving down Fifth Avenue on a summer afternoon, each one creating a little pocket of shade beneath it. The women underneath look cool and composed while everyone around them wilts in the heat. It's almost unfair. Almost, because those women are also wearing corsets and petticoats and layers just like Clara is. They're just doing it with more money and more help. Their clothes are made of better fabric and their servants fan them when they sit still, but underneath all that, they're sweating too. Everyone's sweating. You can't escape it. That's the great equalizer about summer heat. It doesn't care how much money you have, it just cares about physics, about the sun and the air and the limitations of the human body. The rich can make themselves more comfortable, but they can't make themselves immune. The needle rises and falls. The afternoon stretches on. Clara thinks about her cotton dress and her paper fan and her straw-hatted father, all of them doing what people have done for centuries, making do, getting by, waiting for the sun to go down and the temperature to drop, and another day of summer to end. Tomorrow she'll do it all again, and the day after that, and the day after that. Until the weather breaks, or September comes, or the ice runs out. Whichever happens first, the factory lets out at 7 when the sun is finally starting to dip toward the Hudson and the worst of the day's heat has begun to ease. Clara walks out into the evening air and takes a breath that doesn't feel like inhaling warm soup. It's still hot. It'll be hot for hours yet, but there's something different about evening heat, something less aggressive. The sun isn't beating down on you anymore. The buildings aren't radiating stored warmth quite as fiercely. You can almost imagine being comfortable. Almost. Clara takes the long way home tonight, not because she wants to delay returning to her cramped apartment, though she does, but because her friend Mary from the factory asked her to drop off some mending at a house uptown, a brownstone on 23rd Street where Mary's sister works as a maid. It's out of the way, but Mary slipped her a nickel for the trouble, and a nickel is a nickel. The walk takes Clara through neighbourhoods she doesn't usually see, past the Bowery with its saloons and flop houses, through the Flatiron district with its newer buildings and wider sidewalks, up into the area where the brownstones start, 4- and 5-storey houses made of chocolate-coloured stone with stoops and bay windows and little front gardens planted with flowers. These houses are different from the tenements, obviously, but Clara finds herself really looking at them tonight, noticing things she's never paid attention to before, like the ceilings. She can see through the windows as she walks, glimpses of parlours and sitting rooms lit by gas lamps, and the ceilings in these rooms are high, really high, 12 feet, maybe 14, so much space above people's heads that it looks almost wasteful. Why would anyone need that much empty air? But then Clara thinks about her own apartment, where the ceiling is maybe 8 feet up on a good day, low enough that her father can touch it if he reaches, and she thinks about how the heat rises and pools up there, pressing down on everyone below, making the whole room feel like a box with the lid closed. In those brownstones, the heat rises too, but it has somewhere to go. All that empty space above the furniture and the people means the hottest air floats up and stays there 15 feet off the ground, while the slightly cooler air settles down where the humans are. It's not a huge difference, a few degrees maybe, but a few degrees can be the difference between sleeping and not sleeping, between making it through a heat wave and not making it through. The rich people figured this out a long time ago. High ceilings aren't just about looking fancy, they're about staying alive in summer. Clara keeps walking and she notices something else. The windows. These brownstones have tall windows, much taller than the ones in the tenements. Some of them stretch almost from floor to ceiling, with the bottom half that opens up and the top half that stays fixed. And above the interior doors, she can see smaller windows, rectangular ones set into the wall near the ceiling. Transom windows. That's what Mary calls them. Her sister has mentioned them before, talking about her work in the big house. The transoms can be opened or closed with a little crank, and when they're open, air flows from room to room even when the doors are shut. Privacy without stuffiness. You can close your bedroom door and still get a breeze from the hallway. In Clara's apartment, closing the door means cutting yourself off from whatever thin air movement might exist. The rooms are too small and too sealed up. Heat gets trapped and stays trapped. There's no way to let it escape without opening everything wide. And opening everything wide means no privacy and all the noise and smells from the neighbours pouring in. These houses were designed different. Someone sat down and thought about how air moves, how heat behaves, how to build a home that breathes. The tenements were designed to pack in as many paying bodies as possible. The brownstones were designed for living. Clara reaches the address Mary gave her, a handsome house with a bay window and a stoop flanked by iron railings. She goes around to the service entrance in the back, as she's supposed to, and knocks. Mary's sister answers, a tired-looking woman in a grey dress and white apron, who takes the bundle of mending and thanks Clara and offers her a glass of water before she goes. The water comes from a kitchen that's bigger than Clara's entire apartment, and even though there's a cook stove going and pots on the boil, the room isn't unbearable. Clara looks around and realises why. The back door is propped open, and so is a window on the opposite wall. And air is moving through in a steady flow. Cross-ventilation, Mary's sister calls it. The house is set up so you can open doors and windows on opposite sides and create a tunnel of air right through the middle. "The missus insists on it," Mary's sister says, nodding toward the front of the house. "All the doors lined up, front to back. When it gets bad, she has me throw them all open, and you wouldn't believe the breeze that comes through, like living in a wind tunnel." Clara can believe it. She's standing in one right now, feeling the air move past her face, watching the curtains flutter in the doorway. It's not cold air, it's not even particularly cool air, but it's moving air, and moving air feels different on the skin than still air. Better. Almost comfortable. She thanks Mary's sister again and heads back out into the evening, but now she can't stop looking at houses, can't stop noticing the details she never paid attention to before. The shutters, for instance, not the decorative kind that are bolted to the wall and never move, real shutters, the kind with slats that can be adjusted, that can be closed tight during the hottest part of the day to block the sun and then tilted open in the evening to let the cooler air in. Clara watches a woman on 21st Street adjusting her shutters right now, pushing them outward from inside the house, angling the slats just so. And the awnings, striped canvas awnings stretched over almost every window on this block, red and white, green and white, blue and yellow. They stick out from the building like little fabric roofs, creating pockets of shade over each window. The glass underneath stays cooler because the sun never hits it directly. The room inside stays cooler because the heat never builds up. These awnings only appeared after the Civil War, Clara has heard. Some clever person figured out that canvas could do what trees did, blocking the sun before it hit the house. Now every respectable neighbourhood has them. They roll them out in May and roll them back up in October, like the whole city is putting on a summer hat. Clara read somewhere that those awnings can drop the temperature inside a room by 10 degrees. She doesn't know if that's true, but she knows that the tenements don't have awnings because awnings cost money and landlords don't spend money on things that only benefit tenants. Through one of the windows, she catches a glimpse of something else. Curtains, but not the kind her mother hangs in their apartment, the same heavy cotton year-round. These are gauzy white things, almost transparent, floating in the breeze from the open window. Summer curtains, the kind that let air move through while still providing some privacy, some dimming of the light. In winter, Clara knows, those same windows would have heavy velvet drapes, dark colours that absorb what little warmth the sun provides, thick fabric that keeps the cold out. But now, in July, the velvet is packed away somewhere, and these airy white curtains have taken their place. It's like the house changes its clothes with the seasons, just like the people who live inside it. Her mother used to do something similar back when they lived in a bigger place, before Clara's father got hurt and the medical bills ate through their savings. She had 2 sets of curtains, one for summer and one for winter. Clara remembers helping her take down the winter ones each spring. The dust that would fly when they shook them out, the relief of hanging the lighter ones in their place. Now they have one set of curtains and they stay up all year. One more small thing that got lost along the way. She's walking through a different world up here. A world where houses are built to work with the weather instead of against it. Where someone thought about airflow and shade and ventilation before they laid the first brick. Where living through summer is a matter of design, not just endurance. It makes her angry, if she's honest. Why should some people get to live in houses that breathe while others suffocate in brick boxes? Why should the rich get high ceilings and cross ventilation while the poor get rooms with one window that faces another brick wall 6 feet away? But she knows the answer. The answer is money. The answer is always money. Clara turns down Fifth Avenue for a block just to see the really grand houses, the ones that belong to families with names like Astor and Vanderbilt. These aren't brownstones, these are mansions, limestone and marble, with actual gardens and iron fences and carriages waiting out front. And rising from the rooftops, she can see something she's only ever seen in pictures before. Cupolus, little windowed rooms perched on top of the house with windows on all sides. From down here, they look like fancy decoration, like someone stuck a dollhouse on top of a mansion just because they could. But Clara knows what they're really for. Heat rises. Everyone knows that. In a house with high ceilings, the heat rises to the top of the room, but in a house with a cupola, the heat rises all the way up, through the top floor, through the attic, and into that little windowed room at the very peak. And then if you open those cupola windows, the heat escapes into the sky. It's like a chimney for hot air. The whole house becomes a giant pump, pulling cool air in through the lower windows and pushing hot air out through the top. Some of the fancier houses have belvederes, which are basically the same thing, but bigger. Little towers with windows all around, sometimes with a walkway where people can stand and enjoy the view. Clara has heard that rich families go up to their belvederes on summer evenings, catching breezes that never reach street level, looking out over the city while everyone below them swelters. Must be nice. She turns back east, heading toward home now. The brownstones give way to smaller buildings, then to the commercial blocks, then to the tenements that crowd together on the Lower East Side. With each block, the streets get narrower and the buildings get closer, and the air gets thicker and stiller. By the time Clara reaches her own neighbourhood, she's sweating again. The brief respite of the cross-ventilated kitchen and the tree-lined streets is already fading into memory. Here, there are no shutters to adjust, no awnings to shade the windows, no cupolas to vent the heat. Just brick and more brick, absorbing the sun all day and radiating it back all night. The tenements do have one thing going for them, though Clara has never thought of it as an advantage. The walls are thick, really thick, brick and masonry, a foot deep in some places, and thick walls take a long time to heat up. On the first day of a heat wave, when the temperature suddenly jumps from pleasant to unbearable, the inside of Clara's apartment stays relatively cool for hours, while the bricks slowly absorb the outside heat. The problem is, thick walls also take a long time to cool down. Once they're saturated with heat, after 3 or 4 days of baking in the sun, they start radiating that heat inward, and they keep radiating it long after the sun goes down, long after the outside temperature has dropped, all through the night when you're trying to sleep. The walls that protected you at the start of the heat wave become your enemy by the middle of it. Between the tenements there are narrow air shafts, not real courtyards, just gaps between buildings, maybe 4 or 5 feet wide, running from ground level up to the rooftops. The idea was that these shafts would provide light and air to the interior rooms, the ones without windows facing the street. In theory, you could open your window onto the shaft and get some ventilation. In practice, the shafts are garbage dumps. People throw things down them, food scraps, broken bottles, chamber pot contents when they're too lazy to use the shared toilet in the hallway. The smell that rises from those shafts in summer would make a strong man gag. Clara keeps her shaft-facing window closed no matter how hot it gets. Better to suffocate than to breathe that air. But she notices something she never noticed before. The tiny patches of green, the struggling trees planted in squares of dirt along the sidewalk, the window boxes with wilting flowers, the occasional larger tree in a courtyard or a churchyard. Someone planted those trees on purpose years ago. Someone understood that a tree provides shade in summer and drops its leaves in winter to let the sunlight through. Someone was thinking about the heat even here, even in the tenements, even if the results are too small and too sparse to make much difference. Clara thinks about the grand houses uptown, designed by architects who studied the way air moves and heat behaves. She thinks about her own building, designed by someone who probably never lived in it, never spent a summer trapped inside its walls. She thinks about all the little tricks built into those brownstones and mansions, the high ceilings and the transom windows and the cupolas and the awnings, none of which exist where she lives. And she thinks about the people who do live here, in the tenements, in the heat, how they've learned their own tricks, fire escapes instead of belvederes, wet sheets instead of cross ventilation, paper fans instead of servants with palm fronds, making do with what they have, adapting to conditions that were never meant to be adapted to. The sun is almost down now. The sky has turned orange and pink above the rooftops, and somewhere in the distance, Clara can hear children playing in the street, their voices high and thin in the evening air. It's still hot. It'll be hot for hours yet, but the worst is over for today. Tomorrow the sun will rise and the bricks will start absorbing heat again and the whole cycle will repeat. But tonight, for a few hours, the city will cool down just enough to survive, and Clara will climb out on the fire escape with her family's block of ice wrapped in a rag. And she'll press it against her wrists and watch the stars appear one by one, and she'll wait for sleep to come. That's how you survive summer when your house isn't designed for it. One night at a time, one block of ice at a time, one small mercy at a time. Clara climbs the stairs to her apartment and opens the door to a wall of trapped heat. Home again. Clara's apartment is an oven, just like she knew it would be. Her mother is standing by the window, fanning herself with a folded newspaper, while her father sits in his undershirt at the small table, too tired to move. The boarder, Paddy, hasn't come home yet. He works nights at the slaughterhouse and sleeps during the day, which means he's somewhere else right now, probably a saloon, waiting for his shift to start. Her brothers are already out on the fire escape, claiming their spots for the night. Clara can hear them through the open window, arguing about something in the lazy way people argue when it's too hot to really fight. "Supper's bread and cheese," her mother says without turning around. "Too hot to cook." Clara nods. Too hot to eat, really, but she takes a piece of bread and a slice of hard cheese from the table and chews mechanically. The bread is stale. The cheese is sweating. Everything in this apartment is sweating. A knock at the door, sharp, urgent. Clara's mother opens it to find Mrs. Russo from down the hall, her face pale despite the heat. She's been crying. You can tell even though she's trying to hide it. "It's Mr. Antonelli," Mrs. Russo says, her voice cracking. "Third floor. They found him an hour ago." Clara's mother crosses herself. "Dead?" "In his chair, just sitting there. Maria thought he was sleeping, but..." Mrs. Russo shakes her head. "The doctor said his heart gave out from the heat." 72 years old, fought in the Civil War, survived Antietam, and now dead because his apartment got too hot. Clara thinks about that for a moment. All those battles, all those bullets, and what finally gets him is a July afternoon in New York. That's the 5th one this week, Clara's father says quietly after Mrs. Russo leaves. 5th one in this building alone. Nobody says anything. What's there to say? Clara takes the bucket from beside the stove and goes out to the hallway tap to fill it. The water comes out warm, almost body temperature, but it's still water. She brings it back and sets it by the table so they can all dip rags in it, press them against their necks and wrists. It helps. A little. Her father takes a long drink from his glass. The ice from this morning is long gone, melted back to lukewarm nothing. "Or man at work today," he says, his voice rough from the heat and the dust of the construction site. "Fellow from Georgia said it gets hotter down there than it ever does here." Clara looks up from wringing out her rag. "Hotter than this?" That's what he said. Hotter and wetter. Said the air down there feels like breathing through a hot, wet towel. Clara presses the damp rag against her forehead. The water is warm, but evaporation still cools. Basic physics, even if Clara doesn't know to call it that. But here's the thing, her father continues. He said they don't have near as many people dying from it. Said folks down there figured out how to live with summer a long time ago. How? Clara's mother asks, still fanning herself by the window. Houses built different, for one. Her father's got that look now, the one he gets when something's caught his interest. He didn't get much schooling, but the man notices things. Last week he spent 20 minutes explaining how the elevated trains stay on their tracks, complete with hand gestures and a salt shaker standing in for the locomotive. They got these things called dog trot houses. 2 rooms, right? But they're not connected. There's a gap between them, open space, right through the middle, with just a roof over top. He's drawing it in the air with his finger now, sketching invisible walls. Wait, Clara says. A gap? Like, open to the outside? Exactly. Breeze comes right through. Fellow said on the hottest days, that's where everybody sits. Dogs trot through, going from the front yard to the back. Kids run through playing. The whole middle of the house is basically a covered porch. Clara tries to picture it. A house with a hole in the middle. It sounds like something you'd build if you ran out of lumber, but then she looks at this apartment, the air so still and thick it feels solid, and she thinks, maybe that's the point. Maybe a hole is exactly what you need. Here's what nobody tells you about tenement apartments in summer. The air doesn't just get hot, it gets stale, dead. The same air you breathed out this morning is still hanging there by evening, thick with the smell of 6 bodies and a cook stove and whatever your neighbours are cooking through the walls. There's no way for it to escape, no way for fresh air to come in. The windows open onto an air shaft maybe 4 feet wide, and the only thing coming up that shaft is the smell of garbage and worse from the courtyard below. In a dog trot house, the air can't get stale because it's always moving, in and out, front to back, pushed along by whatever breeze exists. Even on the stillest day, there's some movement. Hot air rises and pulls cooler air in behind it. The house breathes in a way that this apartment never has and never will. She gets up and goes to the window, pressing her face close to the gap where the frame doesn't quite meet the sill. There's the faintest movement of air here, barely anything, but it's something. Some houses down there are built on stilts, her father continues. 5-6 feet off the ground. Air moves underneath, keeps the floor cool. The basement apartments here are the worst, Clara says, still at the window. Mrs. Delancey on the ground floor, she says it's like living in a brick oven down there. Heat comes up through the floor. That's what he said. Ground soaks up the sun all day. But if your house is lifted up, you're above it, sleeping on a breeze instead of a hot plate. Her mother makes a sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. And who's going to lift this building up? The landlord? Nobody answers. They all know the answer. Clara watches the building across the alley. She can see into maybe a dozen windows from here. In one, a woman is sponging down a child who looks half asleep from the heat. In another, an old man sits alone in the dark, not even the energy to light a lamp. In a third, a whole family is crowded onto their fire escape, trying to find positions that don't press hot metal into their skin. 12 families she can see, another dozen she can't, all of them cooking slowly in their brick boxes, while somewhere in Georgia, dogs trot through the middle of houses that were designed to breathe. The strangest part, though, her father says, lowering his voice like he's sharing a secret, is what they do in the middle of the day. Clara turns back. What? Nothing. Nothing. Nothing at all. The fellow said when the sun gets high and the heat gets bad, everybody just stops. Whole town stops. Shops close. People go inside or sit on their porches. Nobody works. Nobody moves. They just wait it out. Clara tries to imagine Murphy at the factory saying, "Go home. Too hot to work. Come back when the sun goes down." The image is so absurd she almost laughs. Murphy would dock you for breathing too slow. The idea of him letting anyone stop for heat is fantasy. They call it taking the air, her father says, or sometimes just resting. Work in the early morning while it's cool. Rest through the worst of it. Work again in the evening. It's a whole different way of thinking about time, and they get just as much done? Her father shrugs. Fellows seem to think so. Said folks up north work through the heat like it's not there, then wonder why they drop dead in the street. Down there, they respect it. They know the heat's stronger than they are, and they don't fight it. He leans back in his chair, which creaks under his weight. You know what else he told me? Said down there, the afternoons belong to the women and children. The men are out in the fields by 4 in the morning, work until the heat comes on, then come home and eat dinner at 10 o'clock. 10 in the morning. By noon, everybody's resting. Kids play inside or in the shade. Women do the quiet work, the sewing and the mending. Nobody moves fast. Nobody works up a sweat. Sounds lazy, Clara says, but she doesn't mean it. She's thinking about Murphy at the factory, pacing the floor at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the heat is worst, yelling at anyone who slows down. She's thinking about the girls who fainted at their machines this week, carried out to the alley to recover while Murphy docks their pay. It's not lazy if it keeps you alive, her father says. That's what the fellow said. He said up here, we treat the heat like an enemy to be defeated. Down there, they treat it like a fact of life to be worked around. Neither way is wrong necessarily, but one way kills a lot more people. Clara thinks about Mr. Antonelli in his chair, 72 years old, sat down to rest in the hottest part of the afternoon and never got back up. Maybe if someone had told him to stop, maybe if the factory had let him go home, maybe if this whole city had just agreed to take a breath for a few hours while the sun did its worst. But that's not how New York works. New York doesn't stop for anything. Not for heat, not for cold, not for cholera or typhoid or blizzards or floods. The machine keeps running and the people keep dying, and tomorrow morning the factories will open again and everyone who survived the night will line up to take their place at the machines. The evenings, though, her father says, his voice going soft and dreamy. He said the evenings are something else. When the sun starts to drop, everybody comes back out. They drag their tables onto the porch, eat dinner in the open air, kids play in the yard, neighbours visit, people sit in their rocking chairs until late, just talking and watching the stars come out. Clara thinks about the fire escape, all those families camped out on the iron grating, desperate for air. It's the same instinct, isn't it? The same basic human need to escape the heat of the house, the same understanding that inside is death and outside is survival. But a fire escape isn't a porch. Metal grating isn't wooden boards. There's no rocking chair, no pitcher of lemonade, no leisure to sit and enjoy the evening. Just endurance, just getting through. Sounds nice, she says quietly. Yeah, her father stares out the window. It does. A long silence, the kind that settles over you when there's nothing left to say. Clara finishes her bread and cheese. The apartment has cooled slightly since the sun dropped below the roofline, but slightly is relative. It's still hot enough to make breathing feel like work. I'm going out, she says. Her mother doesn't argue. Nobody argues with going out on a night like this. Clara climbs through the window onto the fire escape. Her brothers have claimed the good spots, the ones where the metal slats line up with gaps in the building across the way, creating tiny channels of moving air. She finds a space between them and settles in. The metal is still warm, but not as warm as it was last night. Small mercies. She looks up at the strip of sky visible between the buildings. The stars are hard to see through the haze, but they're there. The same stars that are shining down on Georgia right now, on those dog trot houses with their breezeways, on those porches with their rocking chairs. Somewhere down there, hundreds of miles south, someone is doing exactly that. Sitting on a porch, rocking in a chair, sipping cold tea and watching the kids chase fireflies. Clara closes her eyes and tries to imagine what that would feel like. The fire escape creaks beneath her. Mrs. Kowalski coughs somewhere above, and from the third floor, from Mr. Antonelli's apartment, Clara hears the sound of women crying. His daughters, probably. Come to collect the body, another one gone, another empty chair tomorrow. Clara lies back and stares at the sky and thinks about houses with holes in them and people who know when to stop, and a heat wave that's taken 5 people from this building alone and shows no sign of breaking. Another night in New York, another night of surviving. She doesn't know it yet, but something is building in the west. Out over the Hudson, beyond the Jersey shore, clouds are piling up in the darkness. By tomorrow, everything will change. But for now, there's just the heat, the metal grating, the slow parade of hours until dawn. Clara lets her eyes close and waits for sleep to find her. Clara doesn't remember falling asleep, but she must have, because suddenly her mother is shaking her shoulder, and the sky has gone from purple to black, and the street lamps are lit below. "Come inside for a bit," her mother says. "Eat something proper." Clara sits up slowly. Her back aches from the iron grating, and there's a pattern pressed into her cheek from the metal bars. Her brothers are still asleep, sprawled in positions that look uncomfortable, but that they've somehow made work. The fire escape is crowded tonight. She can see Mrs. Kowalski 2 floors up, fanning herself with a piece of cardboard. The Martinelli kids are playing some kind of quiet game on their landing, their voices carrying down in soft murmurs. Inside, the apartment has cooled slightly. Not cool exactly, never cool, but the brutal edge has come off the heat, and Clara can breathe without feeling like she's swallowing soup. Her mother has set out more bread, some cold beans from a can, a few slices of tomato that are soft but still edible. Clara eats standing up, looking out the window at the street below. Something's happening down there. The street, which was nearly empty during the worst of the afternoon heat, has come alive. People are everywhere, families sitting on stoops, men gathered on corners, children running in packs, their voices high and excited, vendors pushing carts, calling out in Italian and Yiddish and accented English. The whole neighbourhood has emerged from hiding, drawn out by the promise of cooler air and the restlessness of being cooped up all day. "Want to go down?" her mother asks. She's watching Clara watch the street, and there's something in her eyes that looks almost young, almost hopeful. Clara hesitates. She's tired. Her feet hurt from standing at the sewing machine all day, but the street looks alive in a way that the apartment never does, and she's been inside or on the fire escape for hours now, and maybe she needs to move, needs to see something other than these walls. "Just for a little while," she says. They go down together, Clara and her mother, leaving her father dozing in his chair and her brothers claimed by sleep on the fire escape. The stairs are cooler than the apartment, the stone holding on to some memory of shade. By the time they reach the street, Clara already feels better. The neighbourhood has transformed. During the day, in the heat, it's a place of survival. People moving quickly from shadow to shadow, heads down, conserving energy. But at night, when the sun releases its grip, it becomes something else. A community, a village squeezed into a few city blocks. Mrs. Santini from the 4th floor has dragged a small table out onto the sidewalk and is eating her dinner there, right in the open air, like she's at a cafe in some European city. Her husband sits beside her and they're talking quietly, passing a bottle of wine between them. It looks so civilized, so human. Other families have done the same thing. Up and down the block, Clara can see people eating outside. Some have brought chairs, some are sitting on the curb. One family has spread a blanket on the tiny patch of dirt that passes for a yard, and they're having a picnic right there in the middle of the city, like they're in some park upstate. "Remember when we used to eat on the porch back home?" Clara's mother says quietly. Clara looks at her. Her mother doesn't talk about Ireland much. It's a closed door, a room she doesn't enter, but sometimes, on nights like this, something slips through. I remember, Clara says, even though she barely does. She was 5 when they left. What she remembers is feelings more than facts. The smell of peat smoke, the sound of her grandmother's voice, the sense of green everywhere, green and grey, and the silver of rain. Or summer evenings, her mother says, your grandmother would bring the table outside and we'd eat our supper watching the sun go down over the fields. Seemed like the sun took forever to set, hours and hours of golden light. She's quiet for a moment, watching the families on the street. I miss having a porch, she says finally. I miss having somewhere to sit that's neither inside nor out. Just a place to be. Clara slips her hand into her mother's and squeezes. They stand there for a moment, 2 women on a crowded sidewalk, thinking about porches they don't have. Then her mother shakes herself slightly and smiles. Let's walk a bit, my legs are stiff from sitting. They walk, past the families eating dinner, past the men arguing about something political, past the children playing a complicated game that involves a ball and a lot of shouting, past the pushcart vendors selling ices and pickles and ears of roasted corn. Clara stops at one of these carts and buys 2 ices with coins from her pocket. Lemon, bright yellow, cold enough to make her teeth ache. She hands one to her mother and they eat as they walk, the sweetness and the cold spreading through Clara's body like a blessing. When I was young, her mother says between bites of ice, we didn't have anything cold in summer. No ice, no nothing. Just whatever the well gave us, and that wasn't much cooler than the air. Clara thinks about Frederick Tudor, the crazy man from Boston who decided the world needed ice, who failed and kept failing until suddenly he didn't, who died rich because he figured out how to keep frozen water from melting on a 4-month sea voyage. The lemon ice in her hand is a tiny miracle, a piece of winter preserved and delivered and sold for a few pennies on a hot summer night. She wonders if Tudor ever imagined this, a girl on a New York street eating frozen lemon water, thinking grateful thoughts about a man she never met. They turn a corner and the street opens up slightly. There's a small park here, if you can call it that. A square of grass, brown and patchy from the heat, surrounded by a low iron fence. A few trees, their leaves drooping but still providing shade. Some benches, all of them occupied. But it's not the benches that draw Clara's attention, it's the grass. Families have spread blankets across every inch of it. Children are lying on their backs, looking up at the stars. Old men are playing cards by the light of a street lamp. A young couple is sitting close together, talking in low voices, their heads almost touching. It's like the park has become a living room, the whole neighbourhood's living room, shared among everyone. It's like this every night now, Clara's mother says. Since the heat started, people can't bear to be inside, so they come here. At least there's a bit of breeze. At least there's grass under you instead of stone. They find a spot near the fence where they can lean and watch. The park smells like cut grass and sweat and the faint chemical sweetness of the ice vendor's cart. It's not a pleasant smell exactly, but it's a human smell. An alive smell. A woman Clara recognises from church is sitting nearby with 3 children arranged around her like planets around a sun. She's telling them a story, her voice low and rhythmic, and the children's eyes are heavy with sleep, but they're fighting it, not wanting to miss anything. "That's Mrs. O'Brien," Clara's mother murmurs. Her husband works the night shift at the factory. She brings the kids here every evening so they can sleep. Says their apartment's too hot until past midnight. Clara watches the children. The youngest one, maybe 4 years old, has given up the fight and is fast asleep with his thumb in his mouth. His sister, a bit older, is still listening to the story, but her blinks are getting longer and longer. Soon she'll be out too. It's strange, sleeping in a public park. Strange, but not wrong. When the choice is between a stifling apartment and a patch of grass under the stars, the grass wins. The grass has to win. I heard they arrested people last week for sleeping in the park, Clara says. Housing inspectors or police or somebody. Her mother makes a dismissive sound. Let them arrest us all then. What are they going to do? Put the whole neighbourhood in jail? There's no room in jail for all of us. She has a point. There are hundreds of people in this tiny park right now, thousands more in parks all across the city. You can't arrest everyone. You can't fine everyone. At some point, the law has to bend to the reality of heat and bodies and the simple human need to survive. They stay in the park for another hour, watching the neighbourhood settle into its nighttime rhythms. The card games break up. The children fall asleep one by one. The conversations get quieter, more intimate. The city itself seems to exhale, releasing some of the tension of the day. Clara thinks about the rich people in their brownstones, the ones with high ceilings and cross-ventilation and servants to bring them cold drinks. They're probably sleeping comfortably right now, in proper beds with proper sheets. They don't need to camp out in parks. They don't need to share their living room with the whole neighbourhood. But there's something here that they don't have, something Clara can't quite name, a closeness maybe, a sense of being in it together. When the O'Brien kids fall asleep on their blanket, Mrs. Santini from Clara's building tucks a sweater under the youngest one's head as a pillow. When an old man starts coughing, 3 different people offer him water. When a mother can't get her baby to stop crying, another mother takes the baby and walks it around the park, bouncing it gently, giving the first mother a break. This is how you survive, not alone, in your private apartment with your private suffering, together, in a park, on a street, on a fire escape, with your brothers sleeping beside you and Mrs. Kowalski watching over everyone from 2 floors up. The heat is terrible. The heat is deadly. Clara knows people have died this week and more will die before it breaks, but the heat has also done something strange. It's pushed everyone outside, forced them out of their private spaces and into the public ones. It's made neighbours out of strangers. Clara's mother yawns, and Clara realises she's yawning too. The lemon ice is gone, just a sticky memory on her fingers. The park has grown quieter. Most of the children are asleep now, the adults speaking in whispers if they're speaking at all. We should go back, her mother says. The fire escape will be cool enough now. They walk home slowly, their footsteps soft on the pavement. The streets are quieter than before, but not empty. There are still people on stoops, still couples walking hand in hand, still vendors making their last rounds of the night. The city never quite goes to sleep in summer. It just drowses, half awake, waiting for dawn to start the whole cycle over again. Back at the building, Clara's mother goes inside, but Clara climbs out onto the fire escape. Her brothers have shifted in their sleep, leaving her just enough room to squeeze in. The metal grating is cooler now, almost comfortable. The air moving between the buildings is nothing like a breeze, but it's not nothing either. Clara lies back and looks up at the sliver of sky above her. Somewhere up there, beyond the haze of the city, there are stars. She can't see them, but she knows they're there. The same stars that are shining down on those southern porches her father talked about. The same stars that shone on her grandmother's porch in Ireland, on those endless summer evenings her mother remembers. The heat is still here. The heat will still be here tomorrow. But for now, in this moment, with the neighbourhood settling into sleep around her and the memory of lemon ice still on her tongue, Clara feels something close to peace. She closes her eyes and lets the night take her. Clara wakes before dawn again. It's becoming routine now, this strange summer schedule. Sleep when you can, wake when the heat wakes you. Move through the day like you're walking underwater. The fire escape is quiet. Her brothers are still asleep, their breathing slow and even. Somewhere in the building, someone is already awake and moving around, footsteps creaking on old floorboards. The iceman will be here soon. The day will start whether anyone wants it to or not. But something feels different this morning. Clara can't put her finger on it. The air, maybe. There's a weight to it that wasn't there yesterday. A heaviness that feels like it's building towards something. She lies still and watches the sky lighten from black to grey to the first hints of pink. She thinks about the newspaper she saw yesterday, left behind on a bench in the park. She'd picked it up and read it while her mother talked to Mrs. O'Brien, and one article had stuck with her. It was about Newport, Rhode Island, about the summer cottages there, except they weren't really cottages, not the way Clara understood the word. They were mansions, palaces, really. One of them had 70 rooms. 70. Clara lives in one room with 5 other people. And some rich family has 70 rooms just for summer, just for the months when it's too hot to stay in their regular mansion. The article described lawn parties, tennis matches, sailing excursions, ladies in white dresses drinking lemonade on terraces overlooking the Atlantic. It read like a fairy tale, and in a way it was. Newport might as well be the moon for all the chance Clara has of ever seeing it. She knows about this tradition. Everyone knows. When the heat comes, the rich leave. They pack up their households, their servants, their children, and they go somewhere else. Newport, the Adirondacks, the Jersey Shore, anywhere with cooler air and fewer people and the space to breathe. The newspapers call it summering, like summer is a verb, something you do rather than something that happens to you. The Vanderbilts are summering in Newport. The Astors have gone to their lodge in the mountains. Meanwhile, down here on the Lower East Side, Mr. Antonelli is dead in his chair and Clara's sleeping on a fire escape because her apartment might kill her if she stays inside. It's not just the very rich anymore, though. That's what the newspaper said. The railroads have changed things. Now even some middle-class families can afford a week at the shore, a few days at a lakeside resort, nothing fancy, but something, an escape. Clara's family can't afford even that. The train ticket alone would cost more than her mother makes in a week, and even if they could scrape together the fare, they couldn't afford to miss the work. Every penny goes to rent and food and staying alive. There's nothing left for escaping. So they stay, they endure, they become experts in survival arts that the wealthy never have to learn. Clara thinks about the machines she's heard about, the contraptions that are supposed to make life cooler. Electric fans. She's never actually seen one work, but she's heard stories. A blade that spins so fast it blurs, pushing air around a room, creating a breeze out of nothing. There's one in Murphy's office at the factory. She's seen it through his window, humming away, while he sits at his desk in his shirt sleeves, cool as anything, while the rest of them sweat through their dresses. Here's the wild part, though. Only about 3% of American homes have electricity right now. 3%. Clara read that in a newspaper and had to read it twice because she didn't believe it. All these electric wonders everyone's talking about, all these machines that are supposed to change the world, and 97% of the country can't even use them. The future is here, but only if you're rich enough to have wires running to your house. Clara's building doesn't have electricity. Most buildings in her neighbourhood don't. Even if she could somehow afford an electric fan, she'd have nowhere to plug it in. It'll come eventually, she supposes. The wires are spreading year by year, street by street. Someday even the tenements will be lit by electric lights instead of gas. Someday there'll be fans in every room. Someday. But some day doesn't help you when it's 95 degrees and your apartment feels like a brick oven and you're trying to decide whether to sleep on the fire escape or risk the roof. Here's where it gets interesting though. People have been figuring out ways to move air around for a long time, long before electricity. There's this thing called a rocking chair fan. She heard about it from a man at her father's work site. You hook up a fan blade to your rocking chair with belts and pulleys, and every time you rock back and forth, the fan spins. No electricity, just your own body doing the work. It sounds ridiculous at first. You're already hot, and now you're going to rock back and forth, generating more heat just to get a little breeze. But then you think about it. You're going to rock anyway if you have a rocking chair. Might as well get something out of the motion. Not that Clara has a rocking chair, or a porch to put it on. And there are wilder stories than that. Back in the 1780s, some craftsman in Philadelphia built a fan you could power with your feet, like a sewing machine, but for air. You'd sit there pumping a pedal and a fan would spin above your head. Here's the part that got Clara when she heard it. Benjamin Franklin used one. So did George Washington. The founding fathers sweating through Philadelphia summers, pumping away at their foot pedal fans while they invented a country. It's such a strange image. These men whose faces are on money, doing the same thing Clara does every day, fighting the same battle against summer that people have always fought. Then there are clockwork fans, wind-up ones like music boxes. You turn a key, the spring tightens, and the fan spins for half an hour. Clara saw one in a shop window once, brass and beautiful like a piece of art. The price tag was more than she makes in a month, 30 minutes of breeze for a month's wages. But the craziest story she knows is about President Garfield, the one who got shot back in '81. He was dying slowly through a Washington summer, lying in bed with a bullet still in him, and the heat was making everything worse. Washington in July is brutal, humid in a way that makes New York feel dry. And here's this man, the President of the United States, suffering in a White House bedroom while the doctors can't figure out how to get the bullet out. So the Navy sent engineers to help, not with the bullet, with the heat. They built a machine, a real, actual machine. They took blocks of ice, hundreds of pounds of it, and set up fans to blow air over them. But that wasn't enough. The air was still too humid, still carrying too much moisture, so they ran it through wet cotton sheets that were treated with salt to pull the humidity out. Then they pumped that cool, dry air through a duct right into his bedroom. A system to make cold air. In 1881, while the rest of the country was fanning themselves with newspapers and praying for rain, it worked. Dropped the temperature in his room by 20 degrees. Clara tries to imagine that, walking into a space that's 20 degrees cooler than outside. It sounds like magic. It sounds like the future. But here's the thing that stuck with her. That machine used £500,000 of ice in 2 months. £500,000. Think about that for a second. All those frozen ponds in Massachusetts, all those men cutting blocks in winter, packing them in sawdust, shipping them on trains. All that effort, all that ice, just to keep one dying man comfortable for a few weeks. Only a president could afford that. Only a president would be worth it. And it didn't even save him. He died anyway. The doctors couldn't get the bullet out, an infection set in, and all that cool air in the world couldn't stop what was happening inside his body. But for those last few weeks, at least he wasn't suffering from the heat too. There's something almost poetic about it. The most powerful man in the country, with all the resources of the federal government at his disposal, and the best they could do was give him a few degrees of relief while he died. The same relief Clara gets from pressing a chip of ice against her wrists, just on a much, much larger scale. There's a doctor down in Florida who's been working on machines that can make ice from nothing, not harvest it from ponds, actually create it, using chemicals and pressure and science Clara doesn't understand. He built one decades ago in the 40s to help yellow fever patients. Cool them down, make them comfortable. The machine worked, but nobody bought it. Too expensive. Too complicated, too far ahead of what people were ready for. Someday, Clara thinks, someday there will be machines in every home that make cold air. Someday the tenements will have electricity and fans and maybe even ice-making contraptions. Someday her grandchildren will sleep through summer nights in cool rooms and they won't know what it was like to camp on a fire escape praying for a breeze that never comes. But not today. Today the heat will rise and Mr. Antonelli will still be dead and Clara will sweat through another shift at the factory and the rich will drink lemonade on their 70-room summer cottages while she fans herself with a piece of newspaper. The sky is fully light now, pink and gold above the rooftops, promising another scorcher, but there's something else up there too. Clara notices it as she sits up and stretches her aching back. The horizon to the west looks different, darker maybe, heavier, probably nothing, probably just her tired eyes playing tricks. Her brothers are stirring, making the small groaning sounds of people who don't want to wake up. Somewhere below, the Iceman's cart is rattling over cobblestones. Clara climbs back through the window into the apartment. Her mother is already up, slicing bread, moving with the slow efficiency of someone conserving energy. They're bringing Mr. Antonelli's body down this morning, her mother says quietly. His daughters want the funeral quick, before... She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't have to. Bodies don't keep in this heat. Everyone knows that. Iceman's here, her mother adds. You should go. Clara nods. She finds the coins and heads for the stairs. On the landing, she passes old Mr. Brennan from the floor below. He's sitting on the top step, breathing hard. He shouldn't be climbing stairs in this heat, not at his age, not with those lungs, but his apartment is on the 3rd floor, and the Iceman doesn't deliver to doors. You come down and get your ice, or you go without. Morning, Mr. Brennan. Morning, Clara. His voice is a wheeze. Heard about Antonelli? Yeah. We were in the same regiment. Did you know that? Fought together at Chancellorsville. He shakes his head slowly. Survived the rebels, survived the disease, survived 50 years of this city, and the heat gets him, the goddamn heat. He coughs. It's a wet, rattling sound that seems to go on forever. Clara waits, watching him, thinking about all the people in this building who are one bad day away from becoming the next empty apartment. Let me help you back up, she says when he's recovered, after I get the ice. I can manage. But his voice is weak, and they both know he's lying. You're a good girl, Clara. Go on. She goes. Down the stairs, past doors she knows by heart, past Mr. Antonelli's door, where someone has already hung a black ribbon, past the smells of a dozen breakfasts cooking in a dozen apartments, out into the street where the Iceman is surrounded by women with coins ready. The sun is climbing, the day is beginning, and somewhere to the west the sky is getting darker. Clara takes her place in line and waits. The ice sweats in its cart, shrinking by the minute, returning slowly to the water it used to be. She thinks about Mr. Brennan upstairs, hopefully feeling a little better with some cold water in him. She thinks about Mr. Antonelli, who won't need ice anymore. She thinks about all the people in this line, all the people in this city, all doing the same thing she's doing. Getting up, getting ice, getting through. Something is building. She can feel it in the air. The pressure that's been sitting on the city for days feels different this morning. Heavier, more expectant, like the sky itself is holding its breath. The Iceman hands her the block. 25 pounds of frozen water, 25 pounds of survival, another day in the city, another day of waiting. But somewhere to the west, the clouds are gathering, and everything is about to change. The ice is heavy in Clara's arms as she climbs back up the stairs. 25 pounds of frozen water already weeping through the burlap, leaving a trail of drops on the worn wooden steps. By the time she reaches the third floor, her arms are aching and her chemise is damp, but there's something satisfying about carrying cold. Something almost luxurious. She passes Mr. Antonelli's door. The black ribbon is still there, hanging limp in the heavy air. His daughters cleared out his things yesterday, Clara heard. 72 years of life packed into a few boxes and carried down these same stairs. The apartment will have new tenants by the end of the week. That's how it works. Someone dies, someone else moves in. The building doesn't mourn. One more flight. Mr. Brennan has made it back to his door. He's leaning against the frame, catching his breath, but he gives Clara a little wave as she passes. His face is grey. His breathing is worse than it was this morning. Clara makes a decision. "Wait here," she says. "I'm coming back to help you with your ice. I told you I can manage, and I'm telling you, you can't. Stay put." She doesn't wait for him to argue. Up the last flight, into the apartment, ice into the icebox. The cold radiates outward immediately, a small pocket of winter. Clara stands there for just a second, feeling the chill seep into her palm. Then she grabs the coins her mother left for Mr. Brennan's block and heads back down. He's still there, still leaning, still breathing like every breath costs him something. "You didn't have to," he says when she comes back up with his ice. "Yeah, I did." She helps him into his apartment, puts the ice in his box, fills him a glass of water with a chip of cold in it. His place is smaller than hers, if that's possible. One room with a bed and a chair and a hot plate. No family, no one to check on him when the heat gets bad. Mr. Antonelli was the same way, she says without meaning to. Lived alone, sat down in his chair and nobody found him for hours. Mr. Brennan nods slowly. "I know, I've been thinking about that." He takes a sip of the cold water, thinking about a lot of things. Clara doesn't know what to say to that, so she just squeezes his shoulder and tells him she'll check on him after work. He waves her off, but there's something grateful in his eyes. Back in her own apartment, her mother hands her a cup of weak tea. "You gave him ours? We can get more tomorrow. He needed it today." Her mother nods, doesn't argue. That's the deal in places like this. You help when you can, and you hope someone helps you when you can't. Clara drinks her tea. Through the window, she can see the sun climbing higher. It's going to be another brutal one. She can feel it already, that thick heaviness settling into the air. But there's something else too, something in the way the light looks, a yellowish quality that wasn't there yesterday. "A storm coming," her mother says, following Clara's gaze. "Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. How can you tell? The air, it feels like it's waiting for something." Clara finishes her tea and heads for the factory. The walk is the same as it's been all week. The same streets, the same smells, the same people moving through the same motions. But she finds herself noticing things she didn't notice before. The way the grocer on Hester Street has hung a wet sheet in his doorway. The way the children on the corner are still playing, still laughing, despite everything. The way the old women on the stoops fan themselves with that same steady rhythm back and forth like a heartbeat. People adapt. That's what this week has taught her. They find ways to survive. They help each other. They complain and suffer and sometimes die, but mostly they just keep going. Keep waking up. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. Her grandmother used to talk about the famine sometimes. Not the details, just fragments, hints of something Clara was too young to understand. But the thing that always struck her was how matter-of-fact her grandmother was. Not bitter, not broken, just a woman who'd survived something terrible and kept living afterward. Maybe that's what people do. Maybe that's what people have always done. The factory is the same as always. Hot, loud. Murphy in his office with his electric fan. Clara finds her station and sits down. The needle rises and falls. The hours pass. Around 2 o'clock, something changes. A coolness on her neck. A whisper of moving air. Clara looks up and she sees the other girls looking up too. Is that wind? It is. Just a trickle coming through the high windows Murphy finally opened. But it's there. Clara can feel it on her damp skin. Weather's turning, Murphy says from his doorway. Might get rain tonight. Rain. The word moves through the factory like electricity. Rain. The heat might break. The nightmare might end. Clara doesn't let herself hope too much. She's been disappointed before. But she allows herself a small smile as she bends back over her work. By the time she leaves, the sky has changed. The hazy white has given way to something darker. Clouds are piling up in the west, grey and purple and heavy with promise. The air smells different, electric. Clara walks home slowly, watching the sky. Around her, other people are doing the same, looking up, pointing, talking about the storm that's coming. She thinks about all the ways people have tried to stay cool. The ice from New England ponds, the fans powered by rocking chairs and foot pedals, the houses with breezeways through the middle, the awnings and shutters and curtains, the dog trot houses and the sleeping porches and the parks full of families. Thousands of years of humans trying to survive summer, figuring it out, passing the knowledge down, helping each other through. She stops at Mr. Brennan's door on the way up, knocks. He opens it looking slightly better than he did this morning. "Storm's coming," she says. "You should sit by the window when it hits. Cool air will do you good." "I will." He pauses. "Thank you, Clara, for checking." That's what neighbours do. Upstairs, her family is already gathered at the window. Her father is home early, the construction site closed ahead of the weather. Her brothers are on the fire escape, sitting up, facing west. "It's coming," her father says. His voice is soft, almost reverent. "Look at that sky." They look. The clouds are magnificent now, towering mountains of grey and purple, shot through with lightning. The wind is picking up. Real wind, not just a trickle, but an actual breeze that lifts the curtains and moves the heavy air. "Should we go inside?" her mother asks. "Not yet." Her father puts his arm around her. "Let's watch it come." So they watch. The whole family, gathered at the window and on the fire escape, watching the storm roll in. The lightning gets brighter. The thunder gets louder. The first drops start to fall, fat and warm, spattering on the iron grating and the brick walls. And then the sky opens. The rain comes down in sheets, in torrents, drumming on the rooftops and filling the gutters. Clara tips her head back and lets it hit her face. It's warm at first, but then it starts to cool. Cooler than the air, cooler than the bricks, cooler than anything she's felt in days. She laughs. She can't help it. The relief is so physical that it just bubbles out of her. Her brothers are laughing too. Her mother is crying a little. Her father is standing there with rain running down his face, smiling like a man who's been given something he didn't dare hope for. From somewhere below, Clara hears other laughter, other shouts of relief. The whole building is waking up, coming alive, celebrating the end of something terrible. She can hear the Martinelli kids cheering on their fire escape. She can hear Mrs. Kowalski saying something in Polish that sounds like a prayer. She can hear from somewhere far down the block someone actually singing. The rain drums harder, the lightning flashes, and for one perfect moment, everyone in this crowded, sweltering, miserable neighbourhood is feeling the same thing at the same time. Relief, gratitude, the simple, overwhelming joy of surviving. She thinks about Mr. Antonelli, who didn't make it, about all the others who didn't make it, the babies and the old folks and the strong men who just couldn't take one more day. She thinks about Mr. Brennan downstairs, hopefully sitting by his window right now, letting the cool air fill his lungs. She thinks about the people in Newport, in their 70-room cottages, who probably didn't even notice the storm because they were already comfortable. But mostly she thinks about her family, her father with his stories about dog trot houses, her mother with her memories of Ireland, her brothers sleeping beside her on the fire escape every night, never complaining, just getting through. This is what matters. This is what will always matter. Not the heat or the cold, not the rich or the poor, just this: family, neighbours, the simple human miracle of surviving another day. Clara stays on the fire escape until she's soaked through. The rain keeps falling. The thunder keeps rumbling. Eventually, her mother calls her inside. There's bread and cheese on the table, and the apartment is actually cool for the first time in a week. Her father is standing by the window, still watching the lightning flash over the city. "My father used to say that storms were God's way of washing the world clean," he says. "I never knew what he meant until I came to this city." Clara's brothers come in, dripping wet and grinning. Her father shakes himself like a dog and makes everyone laugh. Her mother fusses over them with towels that are already damp from the humidity, but nobody cares. For the first time in days, the apartment feels like a home instead of a trap. They eat together, all of them, around the little table that's usually too small, and tonight feels just right. The bread tastes better than it has all week. The cheese tastes like something other than sweat. Even the weak tea seems to have more flavour now that they can actually taste something besides heat. Later, when the storm has passed and the night has grown quiet, Clara lies in her bed. Not the fire escape, her actual bed with its thin mattress and patched sheets. The window is open, and the air coming through smells like clean rain instead of garbage and horses. Like something has been washed away. Like the city has been given a second chance. She can hear her family settling into sleep around her, her father's breathing, slow and steady, her mother's occasional sigh, her brother's whispered argument about something that doesn't matter, already fading into mumbles. Even Paddy, home from the slaughterhouse, has found a spot to sleep that doesn't require the fire escape. Tomorrow the heat might come back. Probably will. The summer isn't over yet, and August will bring its own trials. There will be more nights on the fire escape, more ice to carry up the stairs, more days at the factory praying for a breeze. There might be more deaths, more black ribbons on doors, more empty chairs at tables. But tonight, right now, they made it. All of them. And that's not nothing. That's actually everything. She thinks about all the summers that came before, all the people who survived worse, her grandmother and the famine, Mr. Brennan and the war, all of them finding ways to keep going. She thinks about the summers that will come after, about machines that might someday make cold air, about a world where people can be comfortable whenever they want, but mostly she just lies there feeling the cool air on her skin, listening to her family settling into sleep around her. The heat will come back. It always does. But right now, Clara is comfortable. Clara is safe. Clara is home. And you know what? That's not so different from you, right now, wherever you are, in your bed, with your cool air and your soft pillow. All those people, all those summers, all those years of figuring out how to survive. They did it so their grandchildren could have it easier, and their grandchildren's grandchildren, and eventually you. So maybe take a second to appreciate that. The cool air, the comfort, the fact that you're not lying on a fire escape hoping for a breeze that might not come. You're okay, you're safe, you made it through another day. Now close your eyes, let your shoulders drop, feel how comfortable you are, and let yourself drift off. You've earned it.